ever built, Japan's Yamato. It carried these monster 46cm Type 94s, the biggest guns ever mounted on a ship. Today we cover her final suicide mission to the island of Okinawa, to beach herself and fight to the death. Japan was desperate after World War I to become a major naval power. Initially, they wanted to remain allied with the West, so they signed the Washington Naval Treaty in 1922, which limited ships to 35,000 tons and 16-inch guns. Kind of rhymed as well. You see, the treaty was designed to prevent an arms race, but unfairly for Japan, for every 100 ships the US built, Japan could only build 60. So Japan made a plan to concentrate their force. They figured, why not leave the treaty, build our ships twice as big, and the Americans can't compete because they need their ships to fit through the Panama Canal.
In other words, Japan is desirous to have a new deal in the naval matters on a much more reasonable basis than heretofore.
In 1937, the super battleship builds began at the docks of Kure Naval Arsenal. 1.5 billion a ship nowadays. Several were planned, 3 were made, the Yamato, Shukaku and Musashi. It was top secret. The docks were deepened and screened off. It was forbidden to mention the 46cm guns and a criminal offence to take a picture. You didn't want to be messing with the Japanese Gestapo, the sword-wielding Kempeitai. To give you an idea of her size, this is the Bismarck, Europe's biggest battleship. The Germans fibbed about her as well, said she was 35,000 tons, she was actually closer to 50. A lot of big ladies about. See, Yamato's not much longer, but damn, she got girth. And of course, she was packing these Type 94 18.1-inch Godzilla turrets. Not their official designation, I don't think. Imagine firing those.
Sir, prepare the gun for use.
But the gun hasn't been tested.
If it fails, humanity is done for.
I understand.
Brace for the flash and recoil. Fire!
Okay, well that might be a different Yamato. But this is a Sherman tank to scale. Looks scared. By the way, the frontal armour on these was 65 centimetres. I believe it's the only armour ever made so thick it was impenetrable to all existing weapons. You can shell Calais from Dover with these. They got 42,000 metre range at 45 degrees. That's the equivalent power of firing a Ford Focus over the English Channel at 500 metres a second. Unfortunately though, the Japanese lacked radar fire and remote power control, so they had to be manually range found. The rangefinder viewports stuck out like these little metal ears at the back of the turret, and then it was this long metal tube that ran across the width. You look through here and the prisms then split the view from your left and right eye. The left eye was fixed at 90 degrees and you'd use a wheel to bring in the right eye to form a triangle. And if you know this angle, then you know that angle, and from that you can get the length. In the viewport, when the top and bottom aligned, you knew that you'd formed your triangle. Underneath the turrets, the shells and cordite were stored. They had a system of pulleys, because the shells weighed 1,400 kilograms, to take them to the separate elevators. When they reached the top, a big mechanical arm pushed them into the breach. If you want to know the details, somebody has made an insane 3D animation of the turret. I've linked it below. Unbelievable this was made with pen and paper. You know what amazes me watching that? That there was only one fatality in Yamato's turrets. Apparently a guy got cut in half by a rogue shell bogey. I'm okay. It wasn't okay. Yamato fired these Type 91 armor-piercing shells for surface combat, up to 50 centimetre armor penetration. They had a breakaway wind cap and then a hydrodynamic head underneath, so they could dip underwater through the torpedo bulge and then through where the belt armor was thinner. If you're wondering, as I was, what the deal is with torpedo bulges, they're like an unarmoured cushion, usually filled with water, to soften torpedo explosions, because without, torpedoes cause crazy damage. Because they don't penetrate, they damage with hydrostatic pressure. Yamato also fired these AA Sanshiki beehive rounds. They had a timed fuse and were filled with flechettes and rubber thermite, which burnt at 3,000 degrees. Apparently not very effective, but it did trick the Americans though, because the US thought Japan throughout the war had radar-controlled AA, which it didn't. So when they came under fire, they used to throw these little metal streamers called window out of the plane's window to disrupt the radar. As you can see, Yamato had quite the AA complement. If it flies, it dies, I think was the motto. If you look on the port side here, by the way, do you know how I remember that port is left? Because there's never any left when my girlfriend's been near it. Hey! Anyway, I had these 50 Type 96 triple barrel 25mm, and then a vast assortment of Type 89 40 cals and Type 93 Shiki 13mm. These here are the AA fire controllers that supposedly coordinate the AA, but to be honest, back then AA wasn't very effective. The US were averaging 1,050 cals per plane they took down. Also, because of the main gun's blast pressure, notice everybody running in this clip, some of the AA couldn't be manned. For reference, a blast pressure of 1 kilogram a centimetre squared will tear your clothes off and knock you out. Sounds like a fun time. But a 3-barrel salvo produced 20 times that. You had to be 50 metres from the guns. Yamato was the heaviest armoured ship ever built, 22,895 tons of armour. It was designed to take on 5 to 6 US ships at once. Had a central armoured citadel containing the boiler fire rooms, engines and ammo, as well as the classic Japanese unprotected bow and stern. The superstructure had all the latest technology: Type 98 Hoiban low-angle director, rangefinder, air defence combat post, combat bridge, compass bridge, signal deck and conning tower. At the back you've got a signalling mast to signal to other ships and a catapult at the rear for launching spotting planes. The main armour belt was 410mm of Vickers hardened. The deck was impenetrable supposedly to 1,000 kilogram armour piercing bombs dropped under 3,400 metres. Yamato did have a couple of weaknesses though. Firstly, this belt armour is extremely thick. It's actually too thick to be welded, so they had to rivet it, which is significantly weaker, and of course the first random torpedo she took, those rivets sheared and she took on a ton of water and had to limp home. The Japanese had a solution though. This little crossbeam. Now, I'm not an engineer, but compared to this, that does not look sufficient. That poor ship with his wonky nose. The second problem is that the lower armour belt is the back of the torpedo bulge, so there's only 2 walls there to stop water. Now that might have been okay, but the Japanese didn't fill Yamato's bulges with water, and the bulkheads behind were very rigid, so often the torpedo blast would just bend the armour around them, letting water in.